As archaeologist and historian Dr. Byron McCain of the Atlantic University of Florida states, "I do not know if I heard of any trained historian or archaeologist who has doubts about his existence. That's not to say there aren't many people out there who don't agree. For example, a 2015 poll people found that a whopping 40% of them did not believe that Jesus ever existed." As Professor Emeritus of Jewish Studies and Archaeology at Duke University, with Dr. McCain chiming in, "I don't know any mainstream scholar who doubts the historicity of Jesus, stated for centuries, but no one who is serious doubts that he's a historical figure. Who deny the existence of Jesus are like the deniers of climate change."
Throughout history, humans have told countless stories, some of real people, others of beings we now consider myth or legend. Of all sources of such legendary figures, perhaps none is more abundant than religious texts. Consider the Greek hero Hercules. His tales are rich, vivid, and passed down through generations. Yet today, few believe he ever truly lived. Why? Because Hercules, like many figures of ancient myth, is seen as symbolic rather than historical. But what happens when we turn to figures from religions that are still practiced today? Figures whose lives are not simply tales of heroism, but foundations of faith for billions. This brings us to today's question. Did Jesus of Nazareth, founder of one of the most influential religions in human history, actually exist? And if so, what can we definitively say about his life? Part 1. The existence of Jesus. To begin, yes, Jesus of Nazareth did exist. This isn't a claim of faith, this is the historical consensus. Now you might think, well, Jesus was a common name back then. And you'd be right. Asking if someone named Jesus existed in 1st century Judea is like asking if John lived in modern-day New York. But what about that Jesus, the one described in the New Testament? Surprisingly, historians across belief systems, atheist, Jewish, agnostic, Christian, are nearly unanimous. The Jesus described in the Gospels was a real historical figure. As archaeologist Dr. Byron McCain of Atlantic University puts it, "I do not know nor have I heard of any trained historian or archaeologist who has doubts about his existence." Part 2. Public perception versus academic consensus. Despite this academic consensus, many in the public remain skeptical. A 2015 poll in the UK found that 40% of those surveyed didn't believe Jesus ever existed. Yet scholars like Dr. Eric Myers of Duke University assert plainly, "No serious scholar doubts that Jesus is a historical figure." He adds, "Those who deny the existence of Jesus are like the deniers of climate change." So what is this confidence based on? After all, we have no writings from Jesus himself, no verified artifacts, no contemporary inscriptions. Part 3. The standard of historical evidence. If we were to demand such hard evidence for every ancient figure, we'd have to erase much of human history, including many powerful Roman leaders. Take Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor who ordered Jesus' crucifixion. Until 1961, we had no physical evidence that Pilate ever existed. That changed with the discovery of the Pilate stone, inscribed with his name and title. If Pilate, one of the most powerful men in Judea, left such scant trace, how much more should we expect from a peasant preacher from Galilee? Part 4. Historical accounts. So what do we have? We have multiple independent sources. Some are Christian, like the New Testament and the writings of Paul, dated just a few decades after Jesus' death. Paul even claims to have met Jesus' brother James, and Apostle Peter, shortly after his conversion. More importantly, we also have non-Christian sources, neutral, or even hostile to the early Christians. Example, Tacitus. Roman historian Tacitus, writing in 115 AD, confirms that Jesus was executed under Pontius Pilate during Tiberius's reign. He wasn't writing Christian propaganda. He was documenting the brutal persecution of Christians by Nero. Example, Josephus. Then there's Flavius Josephus, a Jewish historian born just a few years after Jesus' supposed death. In his work Antiquities of the Jews, Josephus references Jesus twice. One of these references may have been embellished by later Christian scribes, but most scholars agree the core statement, that Jesus lived and was crucified, is authentic. A second reference, less debated, mentions James, the brother of Jesus who was called Christ. Part 5. Other mentions. Jesus also appears indirectly in the writings of Roman officials like Suetonius, who discusses disturbances among Jews at the instigation of Christus, likely a reference to Christ. And in letters from Pliny the Younger, we see early Christians gathering before dawn to sing hymns to Christ as to a God. Part 6. The Gospel Writings. Now, what about the New Testament itself? Isn't using the Bible to prove the Bible circular? Historians don't see it that way, not when these writings are treated like any other historical document. The Gospels were not written centuries later. Most scholars place them between 40 and 70 years after Jesus' death, within a single lifetime. Internal clues also suggest authenticity, the criterion of embarrassment, for example. Why invent a Messiah who was rejected, tortured, and executed like a criminal? That would have undermined early Christian efforts. As Dr. Byron McCain points out, if you're going to invent a Messiah, you don't invent one that gets humiliated and crucified by Rome. Part 7. What we can confidently say. So what can we say with high confidence about Jesus? Most scholars agree on several core points. He was baptized by John the Baptist. He gathered disciples and preached a unique message of repentance and divine kingdom. He caused enough disruption to attract attention from both Jewish and Roman authorities. He was crucified under Pontius Pilate. Beyond this, opinions diverge. Some scholars argue the Gospels preserve many of Jesus' sayings and deeds. Others believe they were heavily shaped by the needs of the early church. Part 8. Final thoughts. In the end, we're left with this. The historical Jesus almost certainly existed. And the story of his life, his teachings, and the movement that followed shaped the world in profound ways. As historian Dr. Bart Ehrman puts it, with respect to Jesus, we have more evidence than for almost any other figure from antiquity. Belief in divinity? That's a matter of faith. Belief in his existence? That's a matter of history.